and there are very well accepted ways of doing it. And what the conclusion is that yes, there will be an increase in tax revenue, and yes, it will be about the same dollar amount that the developer is saying. But when you take into account the expected additional costs of providing services to those people in that facility, because the tax rate is so much lower for condominiums than for single-family homes, we actually will increase the expenses of the village by more than we're taking in taxes. If you look at village taxes alone, based on this generally accepted methodology, everyone's village taxes would be expected to go up somewhere, in the 0.5% or a little bit lower level. When you're looking at town, school, and village as a whole, because this type of facility will probably provide fewer children per person who lives there, the overall situation might be a break even. But if there are more than the generally accepted national average standards of kids per condo unit, then we're going to end up in a cost situation even on an overall tax base. So it's at best break even all around. At worst, it will cost us all more in taxes to support the services for that community, that facility, and it certainly will cost more in the village.
And you know what, it's a specious argument. I mean, to say, oh, well, if I build this, you'll have more tax revenue. You could make the argument, okay, well, why don't we build a 20-story building? Wouldn't that be even more, so where does it stop? You can't build your way to solvency.
Right, well, if you had unlimited land and you wanted to build commercial buildings that took very few services,
like an office building,
office buildings, or you had, single-family homes that were $20 million each, then you had few people with a lot of tax revenue. But in this case, it's the reverse. It's a lot of people with a lot of services paying much, much lower taxes per person than the rest of us pay in the community.
As an aside, just apropos of that, I always thought that the manufacturing area of the village, which doesn't have any manufacturing area in it anymore, that would be a great place to put an office park.
Yeah, if you put an office park in there, that would, first of all,
it would
generate it.
It would improve the look of the community.
Yeah, that, and it could be very nice. It could be done nice from
any of these local politicians can steal that from me.
Yeah,
I just threw that out for free. There you go.
Well, if they're listening, that would be a great idea.
Let's talk about what's the next step for MCEC.
So the next step is there are two things. The first thing is, as I mentioned, to get this done, the developer needs to have the property rezoned.
Okay.
That is a legislative action that has to go to the Board of Trustees. Our position right now is the Board of Trustees should not, for all of those reasons, accept a petition and accept consideration of rezoning. It's also the safest position for the board.
Yes.
Because
from a legal
standpoint, nobody can force a legislative body to consider legislation.
Right.
That's really a standard of our democratic process. If they accept the petition, then they start getting into balancing pros and cons, doing environmental impact statements. That's when they're going to start being subject to getting sued.
Yes.
So actually the safest position for them.
And I guarantee you, from my own experience on the board, that as the process rolls out, the developer will threaten suit. If we put a lot of money into this, we have to I've seen it before. I've seen how this movie ends.
Right.
And it's not good for the community.
It's not good.
If you're going to change zoning, the impetus has to be, how do I protect the community? And not how do I
the impetus should be, let me think through. I'm thinking through a different plan for the community. Here's why, and now let's have a rezoning. But getting back to the property, the reason why they need rezoning is it is the quickest way to make a lot of money going back to how the home run.
Yes.
Right. The property itself, the next thing that's very, very troubling to us is that the developers have engaged a very significant PR firm, which is called Global Strategy, which and they've now engaged on this whether you call it marketing program. It is basically a tactic of intimidating the community that, from our perspective, is really objectionable. What they have now said is, well, if you don't rezone and give us our 125 unit condominium complex like we want, we are going to destroy Hampshire. We are going to develop almost every single inch of it with 106 McMansions. And who wants that? It's going to destroy what is, by the way, the club property is a critical environmental area designated by the village. It is environmentally, would be horrible, and you're going to force us into that. Well, it is a specious argument. It's got really, I believe, no or very little validity. The property right now is anywhere from between 0 to 10 feet above sea level. Under the new FEMA and our village rules, the minimum building height has to be between 14 and 16 feet.
So they'd have to fill.
Well, they're saying that they can and will, between cutting the high points and trucking in what would be tens of thousands of construction truckloads of fill, they would fill the low parts with over 1.2 million cubic yards of fill. They would and everyone says, well, how do you do that? You're going to now be building up a big mesa. Where does all the water go? It's a floodplain. Well, they'll figure out how to avoid flooding all of Orienta and all of the Hummock School and everywhere else where the water isn't going. And they say they can technologically do it. Even if they could technologically do it, because, you know, if you can send a man to the moon, you maybe can do anything. There are real issues with it. One is it will be enormously expensive. Now they will say that, hey, they bought it at such a bargain price, they could dump a lot of money in and still make a profit on individual plots. But it is enormously expensive. It will be very, very time consuming, which goes to the issue you raised before. This type of investment fund doesn't have that much time. It also will significantly reduce the developer's profit. Thirdly, it's right now illegal. It is a floodplain. It would have to get New York State environmental approvals for permitting, which with that amount of fill, it would not be able to get. And under our own village laws, you can't bring in a fill in a floodplain unless you actually take out an equivalent amount of volume so you don't lose that floodplain capacity. So by definition, it becomes impossible to do. So those are basically...
So it's a huge bluff.
It's a huge bluff, and it is a threat.
Yeah.
You know, we think that we should, as a community, stand up to that threat. Even the fact that they're going that route is very
even
objectionable.
for people like myself who don't, you know, live adjacent to it or near it, it's just insulting. You know, when you get these pamphlets and you look at it, and you look, did I think I'm stupid?
Yeah, it's very insulting.
Yeah.
It's insulting in how they're threatening the community. It's insulting in how they're saying, oh, we're going to provide economic benefit to the community when they're not. And you should understand, people should understand how this works. And I've asked them about this publicly. They're saying they would preserve open space by doing this. Well, they're preserving open space by not developing where they can't develop anyway.
Right.
And the way
you snow in winter.
Yeah, the way it works legally is, and when they develop the condominium, they actually sell it to the owners of the condominium. So they don't own it anymore. It's owned by a condominium corporation. They're gone. If you have friends who might have lived in New York City in a condo and the sponsor develops it, then gone, and the infrastructure breaks down, they're stuck.
Yeah.
So these guys are gone. They are out of there once the thing is developed. And so I had asked a question about then what happens to the golf course, because they were going on and saying one of the reasons they need this is golf courses are tenuous these days, and this will help with maintaining the golf course. Well, the golf course will be owned separately.
Who manages the golf course?
I said that. I said, well, you know, it'll be managed by a golf course management company. So, well, who owns it? Because let's say it does need money. Who's going to put it in? They said, well, we don't know. We, meaning the New World Partners, may own it. We'll maybe buy it from the private equity firm. And I said, so one of the partners lives in Long Island. The other who lives in Larchmont develops all over. I said, You mean to tell me you're actually going to take some of your profits, and when this club needs money, you're going to put money in when it needs to be cleaned up from the next Sandy?
Yeah.
Or are you guys just going to be out of here? You've just made millions of dollars.
Well, they'll take the lots that are actually developable and develop them anyway.
Well, either that or they're saying they would put a conservation easement on, which means if they can, and by the way, we're not even sure there's anyone to take advantage of that easement, because somebody would have to, they'd either have to put money in trust
To maintain it.
or someone say, okay, well, what happens now when it fails? It's great, it's got a conservation easement, but what do you do with it? Right? Are you going to get it left in the lap of the town and the village anyway?
Right.
Because they're not, it's going to be owned by a shell. So it's the whole set of arguments is, I find, insulting, and it is in fact just a way for a number of people plus institutional investors to make a lot of money quickly.
Without any feeling about the community, without what they're leaving behind, being detrimental to the community as a whole. They make their money and they get out.
Right.
Just let me hit on this before, because we're getting near to wrap up time. MCEC isn't adverse to any development on it.
No, that's a very good point, and I should have made that point, Tom.
That's why I'm here.
Yeah. Hopefully other reasons too. Now, we all are owners of private property in some form. We respect the rights of owners of private property. The people who bought it with an understanding of what the zoning rights were,
Right.
what came with that property. And what we're saying is, play by the rules of the game. Go through the process that exists. People have said, why don't you negotiate now? Their 125 is just a starting point. You might get them down to 60. And my view is, that is not the right way to start the argument. Let them go through the process. They can submit a plan. It has to be a plan that's feasible and workable and abides by law. Let
A
them
plan
go
under the existing zoning
under the
today.
existing
Yes.
zoning, see what they can come up with. It then goes to the planning board.
Right.
It then goes to the Harbor and Coastal Zone Management Commission. And then at that point, when everyone sees what's feasible, then there's an analysis of what's best for the community. How does that work in with the developer's need? And that's at the point we sit down at the table and say, what makes sense given the constraints and the legal parameters under which you bought this property?
Exactly.
And so that's the right time to sit down and figure out what's right. It's not me sitting at a table saying to a developer, should it be 60, should it be 80? Reminds me of when I was a kid, that old prune commercial, right? Our 6 too many, or 1 enough. I mean, sorry.
I remember the commercial.
But
We're dating
for those
ourselves.
I know, yeah. But that's not up to us to decide. It should go through the planning board. It should go
Exactly.
through the Harbor and Coastal. Everybody else plays by those rules, and those processes are in place and have been developed, and they work to maintain the community within the construct that we've got.
And to enable development within that construct. Yes.
Absolutely.
And it isn't like there hasn't been development in Mamaroneck and there haven't been projects built.
Absolutely.
Well, we have to be wrapping up, but this was a pleasure, and good luck in the future. And I think the takeaway here is to the Board of Trustees, just don't act rashly, and
Right.
consider this, and don't get into this Faustian bargain of beginning the process.
Exactly.
Just take your time. There's no rush here. No
Right.
rush for us. Right?
There's no rush, and let's not all be fooled by these threats.
So we don't be fooled again. There you
Yeah.
go. All right. Thank you very much.
Okay.
And until the next time, this is Tom Murphy saying good night, and everybody stay well. Good night.